everybody, this is Cheri at dgsundry.blogspot.com, and welcome to another week of exploring old Cricut cartridges. Today I'm going to take kind of a detour from what we have been doing, and instead of using a regular Cricut cartridge that you can use in your Cricut Mini, your Expression 2, your original Cricut, instead of using one of those, we are going to use a Cricut Imagine cartridge. Now, I had never used this cartridge. It's one that I picked up. It was probably after Christmas or in the spring this year when my Hobby Lobby was clearancing them. If you're not aware, Cricut Imagine, my understanding is no longer being made, and so I was able to pick up a few Cricut cartridges, both just the regular pattern cartridges and some of the images cartridges earlier in the year for very little money. I think I was paying $5 a piece for them, which is a really good deal. I was actually needing to test out my Cricut to make sure that it was still working correctly because we had an issue at our house. We either had a lightning strike or a power surge or something, and we keep finding more and more things that aren't working correctly. So I wanted to make sure that my Imagine was working before we file the insurance claim. And so I thought, you know what, I might as well make a card and use this as my next feature. This feature is really this cartridge is a lot of fun. As I said, this is the first time I've used this, even though I've had it for quite a while. Only time it's even been out of the box is for me to glance at the book, maybe. I'm not even sure I've done that. And then to link it to my Cricut account. But it's really fun. It's called Best Friends, and it's a lot about, it's got a lot of little girl images in here, which are a lot of fun. I mean, you can make princesses, just a lot of little fun girl images. Looks like there's a boy or two in there too. And then there's some extra features. There's this one that says Best Friends and some different things, like a tea party and just an easy chair. Just a lot of fun. And the pattern papers are a lot of fun too. So I went ahead and I actually am using everything, all the paper, all the pattern paper that I'm using, even the colored paper with the exception obviously of the white, is from this cartridge. So let's get started. And I want to show you a couple of cuts that I cut extra that I don't plan on using, but I just want to show you kind of some of what is on this. This is one of the borders. This is actually cut at 1 inch. So you see it's 1 inch wide, and when you put it, it's about 1, 2, 3 3/4 inches long when you set this at 1 inch. Now this one is also one of the features, and it was also cut at 1 inch wide, but you see it's a full 4 inches. So you do have to kind of play with it. I decided I'm not going to use either one of these on my cartridge, so I'll just put them in a place where I keep extra Cricut cuts and just use it for another project. Now this is one of the pattern papers, and this is actually the one that I'm going to be using. So what I did to do this is I just set my Cricut at 5.5 inches. And so you can see it's the height that it goes by, and it ends up being 5.5 inches square. And this is actually using the regular Cricut feature, pulling from the stock images. It's just a square. So I did the square at 5.5 inches, and then I filled it with this pattern. Now originally I went with 4.5 inches, and I filled it with the same pattern. So when you see it next to each other, you see how that the Cricut Imagine will resize the print to go with whatever size square. So the kites on this background paper are a little bit smaller than the kites on this background paper. I also was having some trouble with my Cricut, so I ended up cutting some extra. So I did the same with other ones with some plain papers. This is a lime green and the pink, and these were the smaller, the 4.5, and those were all on the cartridge, so they all coordinate. So let's just get going with our card. I took a piece of cardstock, an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock, and this is actually from the Paper Studio, and it's just a white piece of card that was in their holiday stack. And I cut it in half at 5.5. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Cut it in half at 5.5, and then I folded it at 4.25, so I'll have a 4.25 inch card. So then I took my next layer. Again, remember that I cut each of these squares at 5.5 so that it would have plenty of room. I wasn't thinking about the fact that it would cut up a 4.5 inch square when I did that, and obviously that's way too small, so that's why I had to reprint it. So I took my 5.5 inch square and I made all three the two colors and then the pattern, and I cut it down to what size I wanted. So I cut this one at 4 1/8 wide by 5 3/8 inch tall. I'm just going to have a tiny, tiny white border around it. Then I took the next one, which was my pattern paper, and I cut it just barely 1/8 inch shy of that. So this one's actually 4 inches by 5 1/4. So that's going to be my next layer. Now when I brought my pink layer, because I wanted to make this actually even a little bit smaller, but with my top layer I wasn't able to do that. So this one actually, though, I cut a whole 1/4 inch off. So this is 3 3/4 inches wide by 5 inches tall, and that's going to be my top layer. Now the stamped set that I'm choosing to use is Splashtastic Summer over at Andrew Designs. And I know last time I was in the Andrew Design store, because she's kind of taking a sabbatical and closing up shop for a while, that she was way down on her stock. She basically was selling out of what she had. So I don't know if this is still available, but you might check it out at CandrewDesigns and .com and see if she still has this. But what I wanted to use was this saying here, whoops, that says enjoy the summer. I kind of messed up my stuff here. I'll go back and clean that up in a little while. And I'm going to just adhere that on there. I've got some Memento Tuxedo Black, and I am just going to stamp my image down in this bottom corner. This is just, I'm planning on making a fun summery card. For some reason, kites are just really appealing to me right now. So I thought I would make a kite card. So I'm just going to put this right down in the corner, stamp it down, and lift it up. So the image that I'm going to use, I'll show you in a minute, but I want to talk a little bit about the inside of the card. Obviously, since each of these papers were cut down from a 5.5 inch square, I had some leftovers. So rather than throw them in my scrap bin for something, I thought I would finish off the inside using up those scraps. So what I did is I just layered them together, and all I'm going to do is simply open up the card on the inside, grab my ATG gun, and I'm just going to adhere this down very simply. Now it did end up being a little bit shy, like it would be if I'm actually going to butt it all the way up to the edge on this side, but on the top and the bottom there'll be a little bit of extra space, and that's okay. So I obviously don't have a lot of room to write a message, although I could write over here, but I just think it finishes off the card just that little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the video, because I find that when I'm doing a video and I try to layer, especially when the layers are only 1/8 inch difference in size, it's very difficult to get them straight, and my head's going to get in the camera. So I'm going to go layer my pieces together, and then we'll come back and finish off the card. Okay, so I'm back, and as you can see, I've done all the layers, and even then it's not perfectly straight, but it's much better than it would have been if I had done it on camera. So now we're going to finish off the card. So I have this image, and this is from the cartridge. Now, if you're not familiar with the Imagine cartridges, and I don't know where, I'm sure that there's still Imagine machines out there, even if they're used, that people want to get rid of. I'm not ready to get rid of mine because I still really like it. I don't use it as much as I would like to, but I do really like it, so I don't want to get rid of it. But when you do take an image, many of the images, not all, but many of the images have a feature where you could take this image and just print it and cut it all at once, as I did here. Or often you can the image will cut out different parts, the layers. So for instance, this one maybe would have cut out the kite in one layer. It would have cut the base where it would print it just like this, or similar. I can't remember exactly, but you would have maybe had the kite in one layer and the clouds in individual layers, so that you can pop them and do different things with them. I opted to just cut it all in one layer. For one thing, it takes less ink to do that, but I wasn't looking for any more dimension because I was providing the dimension in my card by putting this up like this. Now, when you're sizing something like this in the Imagine, I cut this at 3.4 inches. Had I cut this out in the layers, it would have appropriately sized it because I didn't have it on real dial size, just like the regular Cricut. However, if you were cutting, for instance, this, since it's not part of this particular key or image, it doesn't size it the same as what this image is. So remember that if you're going to try to mix and match images, you may have to play with it a little bit to figure exactly how you're going to do it. So I've already popped my image here on foam tape. So let's go ahead, whoops. This is just Scotch foam tape that I have a roll of, and I cut it into the sizes that I wanted it to be in. And so we're going to press our image there down onto the card, just like so. And I think I'm going to come down just a little bit like so. Okay, just like that. So now what I did is I am going to grab some stickles. I have some crystal stickles here, and I'm just going to come off to the side and get it flowing with a piece onto a piece of paper, because sometimes that first bit has a blob. And I'm not sure how much stickle I'm going to use. We're just going to play with it and see. I'm going to start by going down the cross piece of the kite. This is kind of almost has, even though it's fun and bright and cheery, this particular image almost has like a vintage feel to it. I don't know if it's just the way it printed. It's got a lot of almost distressing in it. And so it's a lot of fun, but it's not bright and sparkly. So I want to add some of that. I think my stickles and I are not getting along. Let's see if my tip is not quite what it should be. Okay. I usually don't have quite this much trouble with the stickles itself, but this is one I've not used in quite some time. And that is adding just a little bit of sparkle to it that just makes that kind of pop. I'm going to do the same thing with the kite tail. Many years ago, we were down in southern Colorado visiting family, and we went out one day. My brother-in-law at the time, maybe still is, I don't know, was really, really into flying kites. And he had some pretty fun kites, and I hadn't flown kites since I was a kid. And so he took us out and we flew his kites, and we just had a ball. I can't remember, my son was probably only, I don't know, maybe 5 or 4. He was pretty young, and he just had a ball playing with his uncle's kites. And so when I think of summer, that was actually late spring, early summer. When I think of summer, I just remember the kites. When I think of kites, how much fun we had playing with those kites. And I know that kites should remind you of spring, because that's typically the season for flying kites. But to me, it just is something fun and summery to do. So that's why I chose that for this card. So what I'm doing here is I'm just doing the little kite. I don't know what they're called, but the bows on the kite, and stickles too. And that is giving that just that extra little pizzazz. It jumps up at you and makes it a little bit more fun. Now, to me, this upper corner looks kind of empty. So I think we need to put something fun on it, just maybe a little bit more sparkle. I have these from Michael's. I just picked them up in the dollar bin. And my initial thought was to go with this right here. But now that I'm looking at it, I think I'm going to go with this kind of aqua color bling here. And it just kind of brings out the different blues and greens that's in the card itself. And just finish that off. Maybe I'll put one. Nope, I'm just going to leave it just as is. I think we can get too much sparkle. So there we have our card. It says, enjoy this summer. And we've revisited yet another older Cricut cartridge. So thanks so much for stopping by. And I did want to mention that if there's a particular Cricut cartridge that maybe you would like to see featured, please leave a comment on one of the videos that goes with this series, just so that I can, if it's a cartridge I have, I'll let you know and I will try to do that cartridge. If it's a cartridge that I don't have, I'm not going to go out and buy it, but I'll let you know that too. So thanks so much for stopping by today, and remember, take some time to enjoy the little things. Have a great day. Bye.